Have you guys ever just like been at the barber and then, just a little bit more off the top, just a little bit more off the top, just a little bit more off the top. Next thing you know, you're getting a buzz cut. Yeah, that's it wasn't at a barber shop, but that's basically what happened to me. So I was trying to shave and clean up the beard a little bit because it's getting a little crazy, a little cray cray. And then when I was going to clean up the edge line here, unguarded, I just nicked apart and was like, well, now I'm just gonna go to a goatee. Here we are. Oh well. Hey there, welcome to the channel. Today we're gonna be talking about house buying. I'm actually really distraught about the beard, but it's okay. We're still here. We're gonna film. Today we're gonna talk about house buying process. This is not a very a lighthearted discussion. A lot of people are having trouble with the whole idea of trying to get their home. I know that the market is absolutely trash and it's impossible to really get yourself into some position that you really want to be in, especially since cost of living is so high. Trying to save for a house is almost impossible. But this video is for anybody that's trying to venture into the house buying process, what to expect, why are you trying to get into it, all those sort of stuff, and then like the timeline that happens over the course of trying to buy a house. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that I want you to do is take a second to justify why you're trying to buy a house. Are you settling down, needing to, actually put stuff, you need to square away your situation and have reliable housing in which you will actually be buying equity and gaining equity as you purchase your month-to-month rent, which is your mortgage payment. And just you just take a second to kind of feel out or understand why you're there and whether it's going to be a good idea. Typically, there is usually like a 5-year period before it really makes house buying a worthy cause or like a thing that you would want to do. So if you're planning on moving in the next year or trying to change up your situation in the next 2 years, something like that, as far as getting a new job, moving to a new city, yada, 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 you're probably not wanting to try and buy a house or get under contract of having this huge loan that is necessary for buying a house. So, take a second to try and justify. So I would say if you're here trying to make a long-term purchase that will give you time to build up equity to offset the cost of actually buying a house, those things are great. I also want you to understand that the cost of buying a house is not just a mortgage payment, right? There's maintenance and replacement fees and trying to make sure like you're not gonna be able to run to a landlord, right? The fridge goes out, that's on you, dishwasher, hot water heater, AC, any of that stuff, all those repairs, those are on you. There's also different hidden costs with like keeping the lawn mowed or, pest inspection, not inspections, but pest control and that sort of stuff. There are inspection fees during the house buying process. But anyway, all of these different things you need to be aware of and think about. There are many different resources out there to try and give you more insight on different pieces. I will try to list a couple of them here. Just so you have an understanding of the different things that could come up, that could be an expense for you. Not every house is going to have that situation. Not everything is going to be all that terrible. But anyway, just realize that there are cost upon costs while living in a house that could be a little bit more, which should adjust where your budget is and how you want to actually tackle buying a house. Okay, so even with any of all of those, different expenses and that sort of stuff, we also want to look at basically how long it would take to recoup our investment, right? So let's just hypothetically take a situation where your closing costs are going to cost $10,000. This is going to, be different area to area. You don't really know exactly all the different pieces until you really get into it. As far as talking to a realtor and all that sort of stuff about what the actual closing costs would kind of look like. There's going to be inspection fees. There's going to be appraisal fees. There's going to be underwriting type stuff that's going to have to happen. All sorts of different factors that, get jam-packed in. And that is just a charge for all the different filings and stuff with the county and so on and so forth that are going to be on top of what you need for a down payment, right? So you might not be able to utilize all the money you have saved to actually buy the house because you're going to need to pay closing costs and that sort of stuff. Now there are, different times where you can get the buyer to sell, to buy in to giving you closing costs and that sort of stuff. But the biggest part is, let's take a little bit of an example, and let's just say that you have $10,000 in closing costs. You currently are living in an apartment or in another house that you're renting, let's just say for $2,000 a month. Okay. And then you're going to have this mortgage lined up that's $1,500 a month, just because of the way that you're able to set up the contract. You're going to be able to only pay $1,500 a month for your mortgage, right? So that gives you $500 of wiggle room per month to try and recoup that $10,000. So over the time, it's going to take about 20 months, which is going to be almost 2 years of living in that house just to recoup the closing costs. But that doesn't, when we talk about all those other different expenses, you know, pest control or mowing the grass or blah, 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 fridge goes out, AC goes out, all those different things, those pieces are not incorporated into those 20 months. So you may have to take even longer because, you know, a hailstorm comes through and you need to replace the roof, right? And your insurance says that that's going to be a $2,000, $3,000 bill, maybe a $5,000 bill. You know, there's different expenses that could pop up. So making sure that it's worth it to buy a house is step number one, right? You want to make sure that you're going to be there long enough and be able to recoup enough equity in the house that you actually are going to you know, make this purchase worth it. So as we've been talking about these different expenses, there are really 3 big ticket items that I want you to be aware of. There could be considered a fourth, just as far as like the house. This is besides the appliances. The appliances are going to be things that kind of tie into the house, that are going to be their own separate costs. But the 3 big ticket items that are like essential to the house basically are your AC unit, your roof, and then your hot water heater. The expenses that can occur from trying to replace these different things can be pretty extensive. I personally had to go through a few of those recently, the roof and the AC unit. The AC unit took me back like $8,000, which is the lowest one, that top of the line as far as the actual brand, lowest costing one of that brand, which it's not really that I was like buying the brand, but it was just like I wanted reliability, and it was what was kind of there. But like I said, that's $8,000. That took like a really big chunk out of my you know, savings account, my emergency fund. And then the roof, I actually got an insurance claim on, which is pretty great, but I had to hit my full deductible, which is a very large amount. When I say a large amount, it's not even the $8,000. It's like I think it's like 2.8 or something like that. Maybe it's about $3,000 or whatever. So like hitting both of those pretty big expenses to kind of hit around. And then to recoup that into the actual equity of the home is going to take a really long time, since I'm only grabbing about $400 worth of equity every single month. But I do pay off a little bit more than that over time, just to kind of pay the house off faster. But anyway, I just want you to realize there are a lot of different expenses. Okay, let's move on into actually looking at the timeline of the actual purchase of the house. Let's get into it. Okay, so the next 2 steps of this process are actually going to be kind of in tandem. Basically, number 1, you need to find a house that you like, that you enjoy, that you think is going to be fun to live in, or an enjoyable time to wake up in. And then 2, you're going to need to secure funds from a lender, because obviously you're probably not going to be able to pay for the house in cash, especially with the median house price being like $450,000. That's a lot of money. If you have that much money, then I don't know why you're really needing to look at this stuff and kind of financially plan, because you're probably pretty set. Anyway, so in this process, you're going to be contacting a realtor to be able to kind of look at different houses that you want to look at. Obviously, you can peer around yourself with like Zillow or Realtor or apartments.com, I think, has this homes to buy or something like that now. Like they're venturing into doing home listings as well. But anyway, the long story short of this is that Realtor is going to be able to let you actually see the property in person. You need to see the property in person. Don't try to start anything, put down payments, blah, 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 without going to the actual place. Check out the neighborhood. You're going to need to know how fast it is to get to the grocery store. Am I going to have some sort of issue with, I don't know, rampant rabid dogs running around, or I don't know, something along the lines of trying to make sure that the place that you want to be in is pretty decent. When I got into this house, I didn't realize that the street out front is kind of a thoroughfare for different people coming in and out of the neighborhood. So I get a lot of traffic in the front of my house, which isn't a problem. It's just the fact that when I'm mowing out there and I'm shirtless, People can see all this flopping around out there. Okay, that's all I'm trying to say. So these different things you kind of need to think about if you're in a cul-de-sac trying to be like secluded at the end of a street. Is it easy enough to travel around, that sort of stuff? And then obviously, do you like the house, right? Is the feng shui in your liking? Do you like the flow? Is the kitchen pretty nice? All these different things can come about. Do you like the mailbox at the street or by the house? Are the shower heads placed high enough? Is the aesthetic pleasing? Are the colors on the wall good? Because any of these things that aren't going to be, you know, to your liking, you're going to have to change, you're going to have to replace, you're going to have to move. All that sort of stuff. And obviously all those things are kind of personal tied, but before we kind of get into like where that's at, we need to look at what our budget kind of is, because that will kind of pare down what we can even afford or what things are kind of happening here. So typically on a lender's case, they don't want you to go above like 33 to 35% of your gross income when you're looking at a mortgage payment. And that kind of determines how much you can actually get. Personally, I want you to try and stay under 30%. Not that I can advise that or anything, but I'm just saying, like, when I'm looking at stuff, I want to try and make sure that it's lower and it doesn't cost as much for me to actually obtain this house or own this house. The higher that you get, the harder it is. And if you have an expense that comes up that you need money for, I don't know, the kids need braces, whatever. Those different things, you don't want to get behind on your house payment because someone can come take it. That would be absolutely terrible. Lose all that equity. Don't want to have that happen. Okay. So in the research of looking this stuff up on how lenders actually like appraise you for how much you're actually worth, you take your gross income, multiply it by about 33% or 0.33. Then you subtract any kind of debt obligations that you have, whether you have like a car loan or personal loan or student debt, subtract those different obligations on a month-to-month basis of whatever your payment is. So 33% minus those different debt obligations should be the amount that they will actually appraise you for on how much you can have on the mortgage in a monthly payment. Now, obviously, each lender is going to have their own policies and their own guesstimations about what you can afford. And so some will like make it be higher, like 43%, and some will be lower, like 28%. But anyway, the long story short is that they probably want you around that 33%. I know that I've heard that they definitely want you under 40, and they probably want you more to 28. But anyway, long story short, you can kind of guesstimate yourself on what you could kind of afford, or what you would be approved for from a lender. But like I said, each one's going to be different, and you're going to have to do shopping around for different lenders at some point. Maybe not right off the bat, but being secured in a loan or being pre-approved for your mortgage is also a good selling technique or a buying technique, in the sense that you can sell yourself saying like, hey, I've already been approved for this. So like, you know, the money's there. We can just go ahead and get this done. And a decent tool to kind of look at how those different expenses come together for a mortgage to see where that payment lies is US Mortgage Calculator. I should have it linked below. But anyway, you can like put in all the different expenses and the amortization of your loan, as far as you're going to buy now and you're going to have a 30-year loan and so on and so forth. The different taxes, the different insurance, blah, 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 blah. And it lets you kind of culminate together what a principal and interest payment, along with taxes and insurance, would all be wrapped together, HOA fees, all that sort of stuff, into your payment to say like, hey, this house would cost like, whatever, $2,000 or something like that. So anyway, it's a fun little tool. I play with it a lot, especially when looking at different houses. Because it's just a weird, nerdy thing that I do. Okay, so now that you've got like an idea of what you want and the price range that you want, as far as when I say idea, like the mailbox being closer or farther, the shower heads being a certain distance, the feng shui of the kitchen and how things move, whether you need a dining room or whether it's a breakfast nook is just okay. Anyway, all those different pieces that you're kind of wanting, then you can kind of have your realtor go in and take those stipulations, take those different things, and give you different options, right? So how I personally do it, or like to have my realtor do, is I want to see the price range in the area or in the town that I'm in to try and figure out like, okay, this is what the market is dictating this price is. What house do I like the best, or I think has the most amenities that cause me to be like, yes, that's the one that I want. Okay, now while you're working with your realtor to try and figure out where you want to actually place, you also need to shop around for lenders, right? These are the two things in tandem. So if you're going to look for lenders, you need to read the fine print. Read the fine print. Now, there's going to be all sorts of different stipulations that come with each lender, and you need to make sure that you're comfortable with whoever's servicing your loan. Some will cause you to have fees for paying early. Some will only use check and not have an online feature. Some people will have you, get a fee for talking to your loan officer. Just kidding. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but maybe. Anyway, sometimes they'll make you do the hokey pokey and turn yourself around. Just understand that you need to be comfortable with where you're going with your lending and who it is that you are working with. So shop around and find a lender that you like. Okay, we need to fast forward for time's sake. I know this video is getting long. Apologize. Anyway, let's move into the actual time when you have the house that you want to actually buy and you have your lender aligned where you're like, hey, we're going to work with you and these prices are where you can kind of hit at. You're going to use your realtor that you've been working with to actually talk to the seller, right? So the realtor is going to talk to the realtor who's representing the seller. Okay, now when you start these proceedings with talking to the seller, just remember that everything is on the table. Just because they have it listed at $180,000 or something like that, that does not mean that you have to pay $180,000, okay? It's not that you're going to the Walmart and it's like, well, you buy it for that or you don't. That's just what it is. Like, this stuff is up for negotiations, right? You go in and you find a cracked tile, or the paint is smeared, or there's a big hole in the wall, or the roof is caved in. I don't know. Any of those sort of things can be utilized to leverage your position and say, hey, I don't think it's worth that much. Hey, I want you to concede on this. Hey, I want you to fix that. Hey, you need to, do this, that, or the other. Now, obviously, well, not obviously, but in my case, I came up with a bunch of different things that were like that. This door squeaks. This thing doesn't align properly. This has a hard, issue, blah, 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 blah. Some of them they fixed. Some of them they didn't fix. And anyway, they eventually conceded on I think I had a bunch of holes in the carpet, which I still do because I don't really care. But anyway, there were holes in the carpet and I said, I'm going to need the carpet replaced because there's holes in the carpet. And they said, okay, we're going to let you go ahead and do that on your own, but we'll take the closing costs, right? So they said, we're going to pay your closing costs so that you can get the carpet repaired when you move in. Does that sound good? I was like, that sounds fantastic. It's great. Now, I didn't have to go get the carpet repaired. The holes are still in the carpet, but I used it as a bargaining chip to be able to juxtaposition of saying like, hey, eventually I might need to repair the carpet, right? So when I go to sell this place, someone might not like that the carpet has holes in them. And so I will do the same thing for them, right? I'll either take their closing costs so that they can get the carpet that they want for their place, or I go in and actually get the carpets replaced with whatever they want. But anyway, long story short, it's the same thing with like painting or the fixtures or whatever. You want to utilize any of that, you can. Now, there is the opportunity of which you become like too needy, right? You become too much of a Karen, or you're wanting the seller to have to concede too much. You can annoy them, that sort of thing. And then they have every right to be like, no, I'm not selling to you. Move on, go on, get out of here. But anyway, just know that it's up for debate and you can try and, you don't have to lock into whatever the list price is, right? You can do things that would allow you to have a better opportunity to be more financially secure in your purchase. Okay, I forgot to tell you, there is a spot where you have to put down some earnest money in which you're saying, hey, here's $1,000 that I'm actually interested in. And if we do fall through on the contract, you're not wasting your time for the month that we have it off the market. All right. So that $1,000 interest money goes up front just to say like, hey, let's talk about these things. And then you have that discussion back and forth about all the different pieces that are coming through. Forgot to mention that. I apologize. But that $1,000 doesn't just go into oblivion, okay? That $1,000 will be utilized toward your closing cost or toward your down payment. You don't just lose that $1,000 if the sale goes through. You lose that $1,000 when you decide to pull out because you find some sort of situation that's an issue. But that $1,000 also lets you have entry into the property in the sense that you can have an inspector come in and then look at all those different pieces that could be issues or could have problems. Now, with that being said, when we're talking about looking at an inspector to find all those different issues, we do want to maybe think about not utilizing the recommendation from our realtor. If you think about it, the recommendation from a realtor could possibly be a symbiotic or a mutualistic relationship in the sense that they are helping each other out, right? The realtor wants to utilize or will give them business. The inspector will get business from the realtor. So the realtor or the inspector does not want to make the realtor's deal fall through, right? The realtor is trying to make money off the sale. And so the inspector wants to do right by the realtor so that they continue to have more recommendations, that sort of stuff. It's kind of a I scratch your back, you scratch my back type thing. So there could be that situation. Not saying that that is everybody or the case for everybody. There's definitely a more moralistic a portion to this, right? So like an inspector who really wants to make sure that they have a well-respected reputation and is doing the right thing by their tenants or their contract, their customers. Whew. The person buying the house is going to be a customer of the inspector. Anyway, there's a moralistic clause there in which those people are going to want to do right by their customers. So it may not be the case with everybody, but just know that that may be a thing. So when your realtor says, I have an inspector that you can use, maybe be like, nah, I'm going to go ahead and get my own inspector. And then you have to set up a date with the homeowner to be like, hey, can you get out of the house for an hour so that we can come in and inspect the property to find anything that might be a problem. They'll usually go through, they'll look at the foundation. They're going to look for cracks and different settling and all that sort of stuff. They'll look at the AC unit, what the age of it is, how worn out it is, all that sort of stuff. They're going to look at the hot water heater, figure out all that different stuff. They'll be looking for different drafts and, maybe water spills. They're going to look for mold. They're going to look for the integrity of the roof, so on and so forth. They're going to look for all sorts of different things to try and give you a best understanding of the different issues with the house that you might need to be aware of, whether the house is falling into a river or whatever. But anyway, they're just trying to help you figure out what's wrong. And then we kind of go back and forth on saying like, hey, here are the things that are wrong. Let's talk about negotiating the price down. Let's talk about closing costs, that sort of stuff. Okay, so we've got the negotiations settled. We're down to the end of the line here where we've settled on what the price is. We've settled on who's paying for what in closing costs, the underwriting fees, blah, blah, blah. All those different good tidbits or whatever. And the seller and you are on the same page on where the contract stands. The next little tidbit that you're going to have to do is get an insurer for your house, right? There's no way that the lender is going to be able to say like, yeah, go ahead and move that property without having some sort of insurance for the structure itself. So, that's just going to any different one of the different insurance companies, right? State Farm, Allstate, I don't know, Farmers Insurance, blah, 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 whatever's in your local town. You can use whatever insurance you want. And then usually those things can be coupled with, bundling different things or whatever. That's what they always call it. As far as car, home, life, blah, 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 all those different things. If you want to try and get those payments down, that's also a good thing, but that's completely up to you. Okay. I do want to put in one little tidbit on all that, like negotiation and trying to figure out the different pieces. If you are trying to fight 15 other buyers for the dream home that you want or whatever, just realize that those concessions and those different negotiations are probably not going to be had. You're probably going to have like an agreement from both parties really quickly, in the sense that the seller's not going to budge because he's got all these different people to work with. And you're going to have to be like, yes, I want it for that price, or yes, I want it for that price plus some. Okay. Now there is a problem when the idea of coming to the price of how much the property is actually valued at, right? So when you have an actual appraisal of the property and how much it's worth, the lender will probably not give you above that price, right? So it's like, if you go to a house and it's like, that is a $200,000 house, that's what the appraiser says, the lender is like, I will give you $200,000. That's it. Right? And you're like, oh crap, I just told the guy I was going to pay $215 or I was going to pay $230. Well, now your down payment is going to have to take the $30,000. You have to come up with the difference of the $30,000 off that appraisal. So just realize that that's a stipulation or a thing that may come about. I was lucky enough to actually have equity immediately inside of the house. So they had it underpriced and we were able to hit that. And then I got them to consell because, like I said, the market was really cool. And I was able to make a really good deal for myself. All right, so everybody's hunky-dory with the situation. We've got our price that is set. Everybody's done their concessions on who's buying what and selling what and any different concessions that either side wants to do. Your lender thinks that you can pay for the house and is good with that. And you've gotten your 30-month period completely finished We're now down into closing date. What happens during the closing date? Basically, you, the seller, and a underwriting company or a county assessor type person, the title company, will come together and we'll all just do the hokey pokey, sign some papers, make sure that everybody's like, yes, this is good to go. You exchange some checks. Pretty much you're gonna, as the buyer, you're gonna be handing over a pretty hefty check that's going to contain your down payment, and it's also going to contain any kind of closing costs that you have to do in order for you to be at a certain level with your lender. And then the seller will get their check for all that they get. The realtors get the checks that they get from them, and the lender will get a check that kind of shifts and moves all the way around. Everybody's hunky-dory. Everybody signed papers. The keys get handed to you. You now can drive back to your house that you own. Anything that's inside of there that the seller left is yours. And that's that. It's a fun time. It's a crucial time. Congratulations, you've bought a house. Now, hopefully you're staying for maybe the full 30 years or 20 years, or maybe even only 5 years. But just know that you're going to be building equity with every mortgage payment. And that's just absolutely fantastic. It's kind of the dream, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it's a really big step. I do want to apologize on this video taking so long, especially with me just being a talking head. I hope you got something out of it and that you kind of understand what happens during the process. I know it's not like perfectly lined out and fantastic. Of course, there's all these different tidbits and different things that are kind of there, but I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would, think about leaving a like, hitting the sub, all that good stuff. I do appreciate it. Enjoy the time with you. Have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.